Hey everybody, Ryan here from Ryan O. And today, I know I'm really late on this, but this is Masters of the Air episode 8. I was on a vacation in Hawaii and I just got back yesterday. If you haven't seen many of my shorts while I'm in Hawaii, go check those out, please, and maybe like and subscribe. But we are now going to discuss episode 8 and my opinions on it. So we carry on from last week's episode, and now we are in Rome, Italy on June 1st, 1944. We're always just stepping a little bit closer to D-Day. And today we follow some of the Tuskegee Airmen. Like I said last week's episode, I thought I saw some red tails. That's them. They are part of the 15th Air Force, and they're basically African American flyers. So we kind of just follow them in like the first little bit of the episode. And then of course now we go back to jumping. We're jumping back and forth throughout the whole show of Bucky. So now we see him basically like rambling about baseball and scores and who's on base. And if we basically hear from him that he's been there for 8 months. And I mean, now I don't know how long Buck has been there, and some of the other guys. But Bucky's now been there 8 months. We could say Buck, because he was shot down earlier, he's probably been there maybe 9 or 10 months. Could be more. So we see that he's kind of like losing his cool, I'll say. That Bucky is so angry about not being able to escape or wanting to escape, and everyone's not really supporting it. They want to take their time with thinking of a plan. And basically, Buck mentions this. He even says, well, hey, like those Brits, the Great Escape, 80 guys got out. They wanted over 250 wanted out. Only 80 got out, and 50 of those 80 got executed. So, literal Buck is true. He's right on this, that they need to take their time. If something's going to happen like that, it's going to happen. But at least they might get a fighting chance. Unlike many of the British who were executed, being recaptured. But after that, Bucky even says that he would be fine with dying. So that kind of is like just showing me, in my opinion, that he doesn't really care about maybe living anymore, or he is just so fed up with being in a camp, basically. So we now go on from Crosby. Now we're on Crosby. And he even is saying that there's 3 days till D-Day. And he is now telling us how the American government wants him to decide like what the accurate route is. Like, hey, give these maps to these bomber groups. They're going to target this place, this place, this place, and literally to help set up for the invasion. Many of these crews are going to be bombing Normandy Beach and inland maybe just a few hours before the landing craft show up. And if you're having a hard time figuring out what Normandy is or D-Day, if you basically watch Saving Private Ryan with Tom Hanks, what they're going on is the landing craft, and the beaches, one of the beaches they go on is where the Americans are. The Americans basically landed on 2 beaches, and the Allies landed on a few other ones. Now, 2, you could see some from the overhead view of Rosie flying with some of the crews. He's even showing you kind of from his POV, his point of view, all the ships, the destroyers, all the landing craft. You see all the other bombers and gliders trying to go inland and bomb and deploy soldiers. And some of those soldiers, a few days prior, Rosie was on 3 trips. So he was there for June the 4th, possibly, or just June 5, 6, 7. And we're seeing now him talk about either his 5th or 6th day. And we see them all going into the beach. The beach is already taken. So basically, Saving Private Ryan already happened. But if you recall, Band of Brothers was before. So the Americans deployed the parachutists that day prior, honestly. And we are honestly seeing another overview of where, say, most of those men landed, or I think we even saw some of the wreckage, though it's high up, but of some of those planes that dropped off the parachuters that crashed. Almost like Lieutenant Meehan's stick that basically erupted in flame, and all 12 guys, even the pilots, all died. So I could have been wrong, but I think that would have been a nice touch to add. I'll have to rewatch that a little bit and see. So too, we see when all this is going on, Crosby is not sleeping. He is so adamant on trying to maintain everyone comes home alive. Even though the American government basically has air superiority, that still doesn't really help. I mean, you still have 88 flak guns. You have other types of artillery or ordnance that can take out planes from the sky, from the ground. So he's still trying to make sure everyone is safe. So he's not sleeping, and he doesn't sleep for 3 days. So he's taken coffee, drugs from the doctor, and basically he's not sleeping for 72 hours. And he has to make sure he has to give over 200 plus missions to different groups over those 3 days during and before D-Day, even after D-Day. So we now see Sandra again, little Crosby's little romance, and she's in France, and she's speaking French to one of the, like, I believe he was a Nazi, or if I'm wrong, he is one of the basically he is one of the French that is a collaborator with the Germans, with the Nazis, like a policeman. He's just maintaining power for the Nazis. But now we could say she's almost like a spy. So Sandra is a spy for the British, and we basically see her now with like some resistance group. We see like one or two British guys with her. One of them was a British guy for sure. The other one didn't talk, but I think he was maybe French resistance. But in some of the rooms you see her walk through, there's like paintings scattered everywhere. And I think this is kind of like a tie-in to the Monuments Men. I know the Monuments Men is a later on in the war, but it's basically a group of American teachers, professors, along with other countries like the Allied countries that all got together, got military training, and went into Germany and occupied Nazi territory to take back the artwork that Hitler stole for his private collection and what other SS officers took, like Goebbels, Goering, Himmler. Many of them took so many famous works of art from different countries, basically just so they could. And they wanted to maintain a sense of power. Even Hitler had a giant idea for a huge museum of culture and art, but basically it was all stolen art that he claimed was a part of the Aryan race. Like only the white, blonde hair, blue eyes could create something this beautiful. Oh, let's not say it was painted by like a gypsy or whoever, because basically Hitler was trying to exterminate all the races he thought were inferior. But these groups of teachers, professors, and such eventually did take back all those artworks and gave them back to their country of origin. So I think that would be a nice little touch. But these resistance guys, they made sure they went into the museums before the Nazis showed up and took a bunch of the artwork that they could and were hiding it in some house or apartment. So then we jump back now. We're back in England, and it is now June 6th, D-Day, the invasion of Europe. So basically, we're now talking about the D-Day invasion. We see Rosie mentioning it. All the guys are so excited. You see it picks up morale. Morale is up. And basically, this is going to help the Allies. Because once, again, they get a foothold onto the continent, it's almost like, say, game over. Or you could say technically game's on. Because right now it's like just air raids, and it's more of an air battle for the first 1 to 3 years. I know most, like the British were fighting, of course, for those first 3 years. The Americans got bombed in Pearl Harbor in December of 1941. They didn't show up basically until late 1942, early 1943, and now again that was just bombing groups like we see with the 100th and the Mighty Eighth. Now you have boots on the ground, and that's where the game is. That's where war is. That's how it's fought and won. And we even see that later on in the episode with how Buck and Bucky are talking about that with the other POWs, but we'll mention that later. So, speaking of them, we're now back at Stalag Luft, and they're basically taking out a tree stump for wood to help with cooking with some of the food that they can manage to scrounge or get. And that's when they start noticing guards acting really weird. And it wasn't like a siren, but they heard like an intercom, an officer's talking, and they're like telling all the POW Americans to get inside the bunks, stay there while they figure things out. And kind of that's where Buck figures out, he puts two and two together that they landed on the continent. I don't know how, say, if that was true in real life, how he could do that. I think he would have rather found out in real life from the radio he made, because that's where he's getting all his other information. But in the show, they make it sound like he's already interpreting all this. But basically, again, America allies are now in Western Europe. And already that has to be like an hour, a few hours after D-Day. Because, again, the parachuters were there the day before. He's already kind of interpreting this information. So now he knows that, hey, there's a ton of Americans mainly on the ground. So now we go back with the Red Tails, and we only get a small glimpse of racism kind of back in the States before, of course, the Civil Rights Movement. But basically, men of color, or colored men, these black guys, were not given the same rights as whites, of course. And even in the military, you would think it'd be different in the military. It wasn't. Basically, these men of color were treated even more harshly, and there was like somewhat segregation. There was still segregation in parts of the United States, even until the Civil Rights Movement. But basically, hey, you'll be put in a black only military division. Like the Red Tails, basically. They're all black men from America. Like even in World War One, many black men from America were put in French regiments because Americans were so like racist during that time. They didn't even want to see a black person in an American uniform. So we're advancing from that point, but now it's more, hey, you're black, go be with your black comrades. We don't want to see you because of your skin color. And many of them, like in the show, were proven to be correct that higher ups, most of them did not promote men of color. It was very rare to see an officer higher than possibly a captain or so. Again, that's really tough to believe, but it is true. So now, again, we're back to another jump. We see Crosby has not slept for 3 days. And basically, he plummets. Like, Crosby is so mentally unstable with all the drugs he's taking, basically, to stay awake, that he's losing his mind, and eventually he just falls on the ground. He plummets to the ground and is out for 3 days straight. So he's asleep for 3 days straight. That's where you find out where Rosie's point of view is. And basically telling him all the work Crosby did was so great that it saved a lot of lives. It took out so many German positions and targets and killed a bunch of German soldiers. And I just want to say, too, I love that digital scene of them crossing the channel with all the boats and the ships. It was such a great moment. It reminded me again of Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers, which, again, were created by the same guy and co-producers. Everybody was on those three shows together here. But I just love the cohesion, the togetherness. Like, if you literally put them side by side, those moments could be the same movie. So I just wanted to give a shout out. I really love the work Steven Spielberg did, Tom Hanks, everybody else. As a history buff, you got my heart. So, two, back again, jump. Buck and Bucky, with the other POWs, are now 2 months after D-Day. So we're already going huge time jumps in. And they are now figuring out that the Americans are near Paris. So basically, Band of Brothers, like where they took Carentan, linked up the beaches so all the mainland units can come inside. Those events are long past, and now they are about to take over Paris. They're already figuring out, though, these POWs, that the Germans are not going to let that happen. Basically, there's a two-front war going on now. Russia is advancing from the east. Now the Americans and the Brits are advancing from the west, along with French resistance or partisans. Either the American POWs are going to get executed, or they're going to be exchanged for prisoner exchange. Now, they're not going to really let this happen. So these Americans are now making weapons like wood daggers and such to possibly for a chance to attack Germans. Now, I don't know if that would really work in a situation. I think it would, but I think just kind of like with the Great Escape, many of those guys died even trying to escape or after the fact. I mean, still, your odds are very lightly, unless if you're near where Allied soldiers are. And that's like a strong if. And they even said that in the show too. Like they're like saying, hey, that's a low percentage, but they might take it. We're back now with the Red Tails, and they're about to bomb southern France. Of course, the aid in D-Day and all the other Allied expeditionary forces showing up. So they're basically bombing southern France, military sites as the like. They even kind of mentioned that they might not make it because of fuel shortages and distance alone. And if they do land, they're going to have some paperwork to try to blend in. And I mean, that is a funny moment. Of course, they're black. Europe at this time was still mainly white, especially with Germans. Again, they only want white people there. So they look down upon races of color as well. But I mean, again, it's really easy to tell that they're American soldiers just based on their uniform, but also right now they're one of the only militaries employing blacks at the time. All the other soldiers are in Africa or somewhere in the Eastern Europe or mainly, in Africa fighting. So they get taken capture. A couple groups of these Tuskegee airmen, they get taken to Dulag Luft, which at this time was still run by the Luftwaffe, but a little bit later, we see that now all prisoner of war camps are taken over by the SS. So basically, again, Hitler's right hand, that's Himmler. And now his SS are going to take over. That they literally just follow only Hitler's commands. Hitler and Himmler's commands, that's it. So if Hitler said, hey, kill all the prisoners of war, these men would not hesitate to do this. And we kind of see how Bucky and the other colonel, the colonel a part of the group, even mentions this, like saying, we're possibly screwed here unless we fight back or unless we get saved or rescued. But for now, Dulag Luft is owned by the Luftwaffe. They interrogate the Red Tails, and we see how, unlike with the Americans like Bucky, etc., they get kind of close with them. They're like, hey, do you want to know the score of the World Series back in America? I love your cigarettes, Lucky Strikes, or anything like that. Now, that could be race related, but you could see this one guy is trying to talk to them a little bit about that, but he's also making about race. So, and he's trying to get into their heads for them to betray them, to betray the American government. Because like he even is mentioning that, oh, you're fighting for a country that does not care for you. They don't give you many rights. You know, you're treated worse. You're treated like poorer than anybody else. And I really like the one black American, I don't know his name, but one of the lieutenants. Like he basically says that once everything is done here and he goes back to the United States, he's going to be one of those guys that actually aids in the building of tolerance. So everyone working together and meshing together. So you can kind of see where this early civil rights movement is building up here a bit. Like many Americans and soldiers alike did work together with men of color, but many others did not. And that is where we see them coming into Stalag Luft. We see Buck and Bucky and a bunch of the other guys notice them as being like black men. And many of them are saying, hey, you saved our lives. Like, thank you. You know, hey, come to our bunk, or hey, we'll help take care of you. And your one injured buddy with his neck. All the other ones are saying, hey, they're black, get them out. Like, we don't want them here. You know, they need to be taken somewhere else. Or some of them could have even said, hey, just kill the black guys. They're black. We don't care. Just kill them. But a lot of these Americans eventually do build that rapport. So I like how they're showing that. It's going to take a bit, though. Again, it's not going to take until after the civil rights movement. And even after that, many things were still rocky, to be easier said. So again, with the back to forth stuff in the show, we now see Crosby is getting some R&R. He's going to get like over a month or about a month's worth of R&R in New York City. So he's going back to the States for a little bit. And two, we now jump back to Stalag Luft. And you could see how many of the Americans are reluctant to let these black men join their little like group of I guess I don't know what you would call them, just like a group of men trying to escape, their planning group. And like when Buck is talking to the one lieutenant, Alex, they're kind of laughing about it, and he even like said, well, why were you the only one to talk to me? They all look to you. And he's basically saying, oh, I knew you weren't German spies. Kind of like as a joke, I think, but that, again, could be them making fun of the race debacle. They do eventually, though, let them in with Buck's, I guess, cooperation or fighting on their behalf, or more of Alex's behalf, because Alex is a drawer. He's an artist, and he was able to draw like a little small sliver of an area around the camp, not somewhat to scale, but it doesn't have the elevations and everything. And Buck, and I mean anyone in their right mind would let someone like that join. It's like, because now you have a better chance of escaping or knowing what's around the camp, because they still don't know what's around the camp. They just know a railroad station is somewhere nearby, because they got taken there and they had to march a little bit afterwards. But you have different camps, probably barracks, garrisons, because these guards have to be somewhere when they're not inside the camp, and you have to just be very careful. So, two, before Crosby is called out, he gets called to a hotel, and it was Sandra, because he's been trying to get in hold of her and contact. But he sees a book, and I wish I should have like freeze framed what the book said, or the title if it was like a little Easter egg of some kind. But he just sees that there's a letter in there, and it's basically just like a breakup of a friendship letter, or well, how they hook up. That it's not going to work out. You know, she's being called off more frequently. He's always working, and now he's being sent to the States. Plus, Crosby's married. There's not much to say, and like she thinks it's for the best, which I mean, I would agree possibly, because again, she's even more of a dangerous situation than Crosby is, being a spy and being sent to different occupied German territories and countries, where her life's on the line all the time. So it is now near the end of the episode. Again, Buck is listening to his little makeshift radio, and he hears that the Russians are now advancing into East Prussia. So Eastern Germany, basically. They are now around Poland, or maybe the middle of Poland. Again, the Soviets did have Eastern Poland. The Germans, when they did the double cross, took all that back. They had a big fight at Stalingrad, and also tried to take some oil fields near Stalingrad, but that did not work out. Now the Soviets are coming in full force, and they're out for blood, and revenge. So now they're like around middle of Poland, I would say, because East Prussia is still around there. And again, America is now near Paris. Or by then they could have already taken over Paris. Again, the time change now is a little bit different because, again, it's like 2 months forward with the last few scenes of Stalag Luft. So it's kind of hard to say. But next week's episode this week's, I guess, looks really good. I can't wait to see it. I mean, it's sad there's only a few more left. But again, I'm going to be having a new series on Manhunt, the search for John Wilkes Booth, which has Crosby in it, and he's Booth. So please watch that. I would appreciate a like, a comment, and you to subscribe. It would greatly help me out, and I would really appreciate it. I thank you all for just watching my content, and it just really means the world to me that you're really liking what I say. And that's pretty much it. So I'll see you all in the next episode, and look out for my future contents, my shorts, my movie reviews. So many things are going to be coming out soon, especially 3D printing, maybe some t-shirt making, laser cutting. I'm thinking about getting an embroidery machine, so maybe I'll do some patchwork and things. So thank you, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye, everybody.